I think how I've started to look at the business over the last 2 or 3 years has really changed my lens completely at how we run the business. The 3 numbers that are the most important numbers from financial planning for the business: your revenue that comes in, your gross profit dollars, and your net profit dollars, right? Welcome to the Reimagining Home Services podcast. I'm Brady Jolly with my partner and COO, Scott Sharrock. We lead a rapidly growing plumbing, HVAC, electrical, and water cleanup business, and we're on a mission to run a $100 million company. Join us as we walk through the challenges, decisions, and lessons that come with that journey. All right, welcome back to the Reimagining Home Services podcast. This is our second episode.
Yeah,
Pumped.
Exciting, man.
I think we got a good topic today, man. It's one of our favorite topics to talk about. We're going to be talking about how we set our budget, how we set our goal, our vision, what that process looks like, and then how we stick to it throughout the year. We are sitting here on January 8th, so in the 8 days into the new year, one of the most important things in Q4 of every year is setting a strong budget. And It's something that we've started, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, and we sucked at first. We used to not do it at all, so we were really bad at it. And then the first few were horrible. And I think now I can say, the last couple have been pretty good. I don't know how this is going to pan out, but I felt really good about the planning process last year going into this year. So I think it's something we're starting to get pretty decent at.
I agree.
Yeah. So why don't you just, from your standpoint, tell us about how we set our budget and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we have budgeting planning workshop. One of the biggest things that we do is we bring an outside source. We use Nexstar. Our business coach comes in. I think that's an important component. What we've done in the past, you and I would sit down. We would create a big, strong budget, and then we would bring to our leadership team and then be like, okay, guys, how did you get these numbers? What's going on? The buy-in wasn't there. What's really great about bringing a facilitator is you have your entire leadership team. We have 10 to 12 people in there, and we're working through every single line item. And it takes 3 full days of our entire leadership team together, only focusing on going to 2026. Obviously, budget planning starts. You and I started on conversations in September, October, and there's a lot of preparations to it. But for me, it's getting the entire leadership team. We did ours this year together in October. Which is, I think, the perfect time. We've done November before. It gets pretty tight. But what we like to compare it to, one of the analogies I like to use is it's like college football. So we have 12 games. Each of those games is 1 month. And the only way you're going to get to the championship the game is to be no less than 10-2. Last year we were right there, 11-1. We hit our budget 11 out of 12 months.
Every month but August.
Every month but August. So massive growth. And now that season's over, right? We had a championship year. There was a lot of acknowledgments. There's a lot of recognition. There's a lot of things to celebrate. But now we're on to a new schedule, new challenges, different divisions, new trades. And I think the budget planning for me is the number one thing from alignment to top to bottom, to tie every single business unit from plumbing, electrical, HVAC, water cleanup, sales to service, because there's some overlaps. Like our service manager in HVAC is not controlling the sales team, but they're so tied together as far as the turnovers, getting to the sales team and how we're going to perform on them. Same thing for drains, right? Our drains manager doesn't oversee sewer sales. So to me, the budget planning is the most important thing that you can do for your entire operation.
Totally agree. I think if you go back 2013, 14, 15, our budget planning, we didn't have one, but we would just say, I think we could grow 25%, or I think we can grow 30%, or whatever. And we'd be like, yeah, let's try it. And let's go do $2 million or whatever it was then. And then we would, at the end of the month, just look at the financials and be like, oh, shoot, we did. Or, oh, great, look, we didn't. There was no day-to-day tracking. There was none of our team had buy-in. That transition from then till now is our business unit managers build their budget.
Yes.
They build the budget. I think that's the most important thing about it. You alluded to it. We used to come back, even when we were starting to build a budget at BPW, we'd go off to another city with Nexstar for a BPW, and we'd come back and be like, boom, guys, we're doing $8 million or whatever it is. And business unit managers are like, how? What? How do we do that? You're showing my conversion rate up 5%. How the heck am I going to do that? That didn't work well. We had some bad seasons there when we were we were missing our budget and we couldn't get buy-in. A lot of the, I think, meetings after the meetings from our service managers were like, man, how do they expect us to do this? It's horrible. That's why that's a bad way to do it. The better way, and now how we do it, they build every single line.
Yep.
We build call counts, but they build conversion rate, average sale. You know, they might only move that 1%. They might move conversion rate 1%. If they've had a bad year in conversion rate, maybe they move it 2 or 3%. Average sale, we have these discussions, they move it. What I find, business unit managers build budgets that are too aggressive when you let them build it. We end up then, like we built this budget and it was calling budget for 40% growth. Budget. Like the budget's what we set our overheads to. It's what we plan our business, everything to. That was a crazy aggressive budget. We ended up dialing them back. Hey guys, love it. Love the aggressiveness, but why don't we consider this? Let me offer, maybe we pull conversion rate back 1% or pull average sale down $100 or $200, right? And we end up getting that to about 20% growth budget, which I love. I think a 20% growth budget with double-digit profit built in I think that's a really strong budget. So what our 2026 budget came out to was about 20% growth and about 14% net profit. That was the budget. One thing we're implementing this year, we've always had budget and goal. Some years, the years where we didn't even come close to our budget, the goal was like obsolete. It was almost embarrassing. We're coming into the daily huddle every day, and that goal number is so far away that it's unrealistic. Kind of the goal started being something that was a big negative that it was even on there.
And I think it was lost in belief.
It was lost in belief. Yeah, I agree. Now, the cool thing last year, we talked about it last episode, but last year was like we proved to ourselves, proved to our team that we can do it. You know, many departments hit their goal for the year.
100%.
Which was awesome. So this year we're doing the same thing. The only difference is we have a language change. We're changing it to vision. So we set a 10-year vision, $100 million. We set a 3-year vision, $30 million. After everybody built their budget, you and I sat down and we said, okay, to get to that $30 million in 3 years, to stay within our vision, what do we need to do? And we built, that's 40% growth. So how I look at it is like our budget is very much what our overheads are set to. It's what we have to achieve without having to slash overheads. You know, it gets us where we're able to continue to grow our business and have a thriving business, double-digit profit, right? Have a bunch of money left over to reinvest in the business. It isn't everything went perfect. This year was insane, much like our last year was. And this allows us to do something really, really special and hit our stretch BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal over 3 to 5 years. That's what the vision is. So that vision of 40%, I know you and I feel super bullish on it.
Yeah.
I think we're going to blow that out of the water. But I think a mistake that we have made in the past is we'd set like a vision style number as our budget. And we're not going to do that again.
You kind of mentioned this, and I think this is an important clarification. So a lot of times I've seen people say a budget and it's just revenue. You just talked about overhead. And I think that's one thing. Let's just talk about that a little bit. So the first part of this is setting revenue, and that's by the KPIs driven. It starts with marketed calls ran, and then it goes down to every single business unit's conversion rate, average sale, turnover percent, every single KPI, top to bottom. That's going to drive our revenue. Tell us a little bit about the budgeting process for overhead and in past, because we've had years too where if our budget was extremely aggressive and we try to match that overhead percent. Tell us about the overhead and how important that is of our budget.
Great point. So after we come up with revenue, this still isn't on the overhead part, we go to directs.
Yep.
So that's still business unit managers involved. Very operational, right? All right, directs. What about labor? Last year you were at 20% plumbing service. What are we thinking we're going to be at this year and why? Mm-hmm. This year was weird with plumbing service, right? Because we've been selling so many more water heaters. Our labor's coming down, our material's coming up. So we actually ended up setting a higher material budget than we had even actual last year.
Yep. And then our labor dropped a little bit.
And our labor dropped. We had a lot of conversation about that in BPW. Yes. Every department's different. You know, we had all these equipment changes in HVAC last year with the refrigerant. That changes material calculation. So we're having these conversations. It's like a day-long thing just talking about gross margins and directs, labor, sales, and material expense just for the company, for each department, just for the 3 departments, right? So after we find out directs, come down to gross profit per department, gross profit dollars, gross margin per department. We have this big chunk of money left. We know that we want to be around 15%, 10 to 15% profit. We didn't know exactly where it was going to shake out, but we know we only have this chunk of money left after gross profit to take away all of our overhead expenses and to still have profit left. We were shooting for 15% kind of. So what that this year was, we needed to be less than 40% of our total revenue needed to be spent back on overhead. Mm-hmm. Going in, we knew that we wanted to we do 10% marketing spend from our last year. So about $13.5 million. We know we're going to spend $1.35 million in marketing, right? So we put that down. We go hiring plan. Mm-hmm. What positions are we going to need? Not direct, not labor, but what office positions are we going to need? Admin positions. So we mark those down. What vehicles are we going to need to buy? How many vehicles? So what's it going to do to our vehicle expense? We go down every line. I think we have 55 line items in our overhead report. As a leadership team, this is we call it the biz team. This is me, you, Corey, our director of revenue, our accountant, Paige, it's Molly, our employee experience manager, and it's Jeff, fleet inventory warehouse manager. We go through every single line. And then the bottom, this year was cool because it came out and it actually worked out. We've had years, we were under 40% this year. When we came out, it was like, great. It gave us
overhead.
For overhead. Yeah. Under 40% gave us an opportunity to have 14% net profit. It was really good. We've had years we build the overheads we want, and it comes out to like 44%. It would only allow us to have like 7% net.
At budget.
Yeah,
so if things go really well, you're going to be 7% net because overhead's so high.
So then we have the tough conversations. Hey, guys, I know you wanted that new parts runner. I know that we wanted to spend $1 million in marketing. Mm-hmm. I know that we wanted this new call center rep. I know we wanted this technology, but something's got to give here, Yep. And then we start carving that back. So every year's different. This year was a cool year because when we built it, our gross margins looked nice. When we built out what our overheads were going to be, they looked nice. And I think that that's probably because we're just getting a better understanding. Like you and I have spreadsheets starting in like June of what next year's budget's going to be. And we're like kind of psychos about it, where it's like we're trying to figure it out early. So by the time that BBW comes and we have to plan it, I think that we're already starting to kind of dial that in. So do you have any other insight on like how that happens with overheads?
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest part for budgeting is the cross between, what we at Jolly call it our operational team than our business leadership team. So you have the overhead expenses to the gross margin. So last year we were right around very similar to what our budget's going to be this year. So we're at 54% gross margin. That's all departments combined, and then 37.5% overhead. It came out to be very similar for 26. And I think that's important to know as people are building their budgets and getting ready to 26 and doing final checks is make sure that you are scaling the right way. Now, those numbers aren't flat. Like every company runs at a different gross margin depending on your blend of work. Like for example, a lot of our blended work comes from plumbing service and sewer install. So we're able to sustain a higher gross margin for a company, which also allows us to have a little bit higher overhead. So if you're an only HVAC-based company and you are driving revenue, and the benchmark for HVAC service and install blended is right around 50%. You can't be at 45% overhead, right? Sure. You're planning for a 5% loss. I would offer if you're at a 40% overhead and you're planning for a 10%, it's going to be pretty tight. So I think as people are building their budgets, it's important to see those two things. What's your total gross margin? And then what's your overhead percent for that net? And it can get lost pretty quickly. And is it attainable? Is it scalable? Which directions do you want to go? For us, we were like, we're going to be the best operational performance and we're going to afford the higher overhead. Yep. And that's where we were at.
Yep.
And we want to be able to do that to be able to scale. And we want to have extra positions to be able to scale. We want to have really strong senior leaders to come in here and help us do that. And that was the biggest thing in 25, I would say. Because we were doing so well in gross margin, we were able to make a key hire that most businesses wouldn't for a senior leadership role because our operational performance was there. And we were willing to take the hit a little bit on net because we knew that's going to be built for the future.
Yep.
So I think what I would just say, for the audience, for the people is you can be 10% net profitable and build this scale at the same time. This isn't just us coming in, cutting overheads below 35% and, it's not sustainable. This is an absolute budget plan of how do you mirror overhead control with gross margin performance together. And that's the big difference where we've improved over the past 6 years, where previously I think it was more all on ops. Yep. It's a combination now where it's top to bottom.
Totally agree, man. I think how I've started to look at the business over the last 2 or 3 years has really changed my lens completely at how we run the business. The 3 numbers that are the most important numbers from financial planning for the business: your revenue that comes in, your gross profit dollars, and your net profit dollars, right? So between that's how you know how much to spend in overhead, right? So there's, you start at 100% revenue, you take 54% margin, that's about where we're at. We have about 40% overhead, so that leaves 14% net left, and budget planning is very much about pushing and pulling those numbers.
Yep.
So as our revenue mix changes, HVAC is a little bit lower gross margin. As that becomes more of a percentage of our revenue, we're kind of in a weird position that as we grow our gross profit dollars, we're fighting to bring them to keep them up, where we've been at 54%, maybe they're coming down to 52. Well, if we want to be at 14%, then that means that our overhead has to come down to 38, right? So we're constantly, you and I, talking about how do we push and pull that number to make sure that there's plenty of fluff left for profitability. Up until just a couple years ago, I never really looked at the business like that, and I think that that's been a massive part with Nexstar and talking to our business coaches. That's something that they've just taught us. And it sounds so simple, but I just looked at the profit loss statement so much different 2 or 3 years ago than I do now. So I think the next thing I want to talk about, and something I think we've improved a lot on, is the cadence of how we track and manage that. Because I think in years past, 5-6 years ago, we would build a budget and then we wouldn't really look at it. Maybe you and I would look at it monthly, but we weren't tracking it. We weren't coaching to it. We were just letting the year happen to us, and we weren't driving the entire business off the budget. So you mentioned we have a operations team. We call it the ops team. And then we have our business team, business leadership, called the biz team. Ops team generally reports to you. Biz team generally reports to me. Why don't you talk about the ops team and your guys' cadence for tracking, and then I'll talk about the biz team and how we track things.
There's 2 key places that we track. The first one I'll talk about is we call it our weekly L10. So this brings every operational leader, so business unit, so think of your electrical manager, your plumbing service manager, your sales manager, install. Every single department leader is in the room every week. And we go over each individual KPI. It takes about almost an hour every week, 45 minutes to an hour, just to go over all the KPIs and how we're tracking. The important piece of this is not only are we tracking to where their conversion rate, average sale, turnovers, membership sales, we're tracking their margins. So we're having conversations every week and creating specific action items to make sure that we're on pace for this budget. And our leadership team really understands the levers that are driving these margins. For example, let's say recently we've had a little bit higher material and plumbing service. So we've had conversations about that. It starts in the operational L10. This is your budget. You're at, your material percent budget is at 20%. You've been at 23%. Why? So we go through, then that ties into our one-to-one. So every week I've been reviewing the job costing report with our plumbing service manager. We're going through every job that is above 20% material and figuring out why. And if it's acceptable. Sometimes it's acceptable. Sometimes it's a customer-approved discount. Sometimes it's a really high material job where it makes sense, and that's okay. But we just need to know the reason.
Sometimes
why.
They're working for my dad or
sometimes,
me.
Yeah, those are really low margin jobs. But not to get too far off the weeds there, because there's a lot of places we can do. The number one place, the budget builds, is our weekly scorecard review, and it never leaves. So that builds that. The second place, which I think in 25 was our biggest movement, is the daily huddle.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a PACE report. The PACE report shows exactly where we're at with our calls, our revenue, our home plans, and how we're pacing to the month. And it's broken down by the day. So every single day we have our operational team in the daily huddle. We do ours at 9 a.m. And this is figuring out what they need, their daily needed revenue, and what KPIs they need to do with the calls that they're going to have that day. It's the life of our business. So we quickly review yesterday's results. We have key action items as far as, okay, what do we need to change from yesterday? What went wrong? What went great? And then also one thing that we really, really do well on is who do we need to recognize? Who's absolutely killing it? Who's celebrating it? And then we use our platform called Discord to celebrate them. But the most important thing of the daily huddle that's tied to the budget is what is each department's individual revenue goal for today? It's a dynamic goal. It changes every single day. What are we going to do to hit this revenue number, conversion rate, average sale, to get there? That's the revenue portion. And then the weekly scorecard is revenue plus margin. Because you've heard the saying, revenue is vanity. And in a lot of ways, it really can be. So we don't want to be the business that grows by 40% every year and is not profitable because it's not sustainable. We want to be the business that grows by 40% every year and that's double-digit profitable, and that gives you a lot more flexibility. So I don't know if that answers exactly.
100%.
There's a lot of ways we can go deeper in that, but we'll leave it for there for now.
I think that we'll probably have individual episodes about the L10.
Yeah.
We can talk for a long time about L10 and the Daily Huddle. I mean, I think the Daily Huddle, we have a lot of meetings around here now. Daily Huddle has to be the most important one. I can't imagine trying to run a business without a Daily Huddle. I don't know how we would do it. I think we've been doing the Daily Huddle for 6 years now. I'd say we've been doing it well for like 2 years. That's the lifeblood of our business. It's about a 20-minute meeting. It gets the people going, gets juices flowing for the day. You talk about the good, bad, and ugly. Talk about how team can help each other for the day. Talk about action items and recognition. Man, it's just an awesome. And I think you do a world-class job of leading it.
Thank you. I think the point of that is if you don't do your budget, you can't do those things well. If you don't have an extremely dialed-in budget where your leader of that department's been part of it, those conversations are much harder. It makes all those things that make businesses really good, one-to-ones and ride-alongs and trainings and daily huddles, you can't do them appropriately because there's not a scorecard. There's nothing.
100%, and it goes back to the managers building the budget. You get to March, and all of a sudden the HVAC service budget's really high. That service manager isn't sitting there saying, oh my gosh, why is my budget so high? I'm never going to hit this. They're saying, oh yeah, I built this for a reason. I said that our conversion rate, average sale turnover percentage, direct labor, direct material could be this. Mm-hmm. And this was the plan we talked about back in October. They remember that, and they now have a plan to go hit it, right? Because we've already talked about it. We talked about it 6 months ago. So I think you did a good job covering the operational cadence. I'll talk about the biz cadence.
Yep.
So the biz team, how I look at it is very much from everything you handle and manage, your job from a financial standpoint is above the line. When I say above the line, that's the gross profit line. So you handle revenue, you handle direct labor, you handle direct material, and you handle sales expense and a little bit of financing and other. All right, that gives us our gross profit. Everything below the line, that's my job. Yep. I got to make sure that overhead, that's our overheads. That's what I got to make sure dialed in. So we have kind of a mixed biz and ops meeting called MOR, Monthly Operating Review. Huge believer in bringing a third party in to do that. We use Nexstar. Love having our business coach help with that MOR. We're in the weeds every single week, every single day of what's happening. Mm-hmm. Super easy. We're not an excuse culture by any means, but it is easy to make excuses. It's easy to make, even if you're not saying the excuses out loud. Well, we didn't have the calls. Of course our conversion rate was bad. We lost the best plumber. Whatever. It's easy to do that. So when you have a fact-based third party that is looking at that with a fresh lens and able to walk us through that monthly operating review, I think it's been great. That's about an hour-and-a-half meeting. Every single department leader goes through and tells the story about their month. Mm-hmm. What happened? Where were calls? Where was conversion rate? Where was average sale? Where's direct labor? Where's material expense? Basically, it's our entire month. What happened there? Mm-hmm. What happened there? We review net gross profit. We look at net profit. All right, how was the year? That's a really good meeting. Love that meeting. There's some people from the biz and ops team both in that meeting. Typically within the next day or two, that meeting usually, our books close on the 10th. That meeting usually happens by the 15th. We try to get it in by the 15th. And then between like the 15th and 18th or 15th and 20th, we have our biz review, our overhead review. So go through, I think there's 55 lines of our overhead. and on our P&L of overheads, we go through line by line. Where do we budget? It starts with like employee. I think it starts with training. So, all right, training line. We have our employee experience manager in there. Training budget was this, and this is where we were. If it's good, great, very good. If it's over, hey, what happened? Where's training? What are we looking at for the rest of the year? Where are we year to date on this, on the training budget? Are we still in line? If not, let's make adjustments. Go down every single line: admin expense, marketing, vehicles, building expense. I mean, every single line is looked at with everybody in that room who impacts that. That meeting to me has been one of the number one drivers of profit, because we've been able to identify things that are happening in our business that we never would have recognized before. You know, Paige, our controller, accounting manager, is entering thousands of invoices that hit overheads every month. You know, so it's impossible for me, my responsibility to look over the overheads. I can't possibly know every single invoice that's hitting and track and manage. And I think that's what we used to do. I'd sign the checks. Things that were paid online, I'd get a report, seeing what those were. I'd look at the credit card report, but it's so easy to lose track of. And then all of a sudden we'd have a great gross profit month and come in and our overheads are at like 45%. And that just happened to us. And then the next month it would build onto that and build onto that. And we felt like, I've ran the business before for years where I felt like I had no control over profitability, like none. I think that the combination of daily huddle, weekly L10, monthly operating review, biz overhead meeting, that's where we start to control the profit. The last meeting is the biz L10. So much like the ops L10, we have a biz L10. We do that every other week. And that is talking about more high level company issues or like kind of more of a longer outlook. So we may talk about things in there like these acquisitions that we've been working on, or launching the electrical department that we've been working on. We each have a scorecard and we go over those scorecards. We may talk about personnel issues from a high level. And that meeting too, I think between all of those meetings, like I said, we're starting to control the profit of the business. And I think we've been maybe doing a pretty decent job of that for just about a year or two.
Yeah. You know, one thing you brought up, and I don't want it to get lost, like you as the owner, you do an amazing job with financial transparency. I think a lot of times that can make other owners, you know, very uncomfortable. You know, what is the true bottom line? What is the true net profit? What is the EBITDA at? Walk us through the impact that's made since you've shared that with your senior leadership team, where they see everything in the business. Like there's nothing hidden. Every line item is fully exposed. Walk us through the process of, you know, what led you there and the impact that it's made.
Yeah. So one of our values is win the day. Know your metrics, own your results. I do mission, vision, values onboarding with every new employee. And what I say is, if you play a basketball game, football game, baseball game, imagine playing and your team can't see the scoreboard. You would probably lose the game. If you can't see the scoreboard, it'd be hard to win. You're not changing your plays.
Definitely can't make adjustments.
Can't change plays, change things at halftime because you don't even know the score. You're losing track. What I find is a lot of businesses I go visit, our business for years was ran where one person knew the score. It was me. I knew the score. That was it. Nobody else did. So I'm over here like some kind of magician trying to pull all these strings to make sure that everybody lines up to where their score is going to come out on our side and we're going to win. Horrible way to run a business. You know, if you're not giving every single person numbers and goals and driving them towards those goals and showing them why and why that impacts them, you're not going to be able to run a successful business, or at least I couldn't figure it out. So super uncomfortable. Sometimes we talk about revenue, and I was even uncomfortable talking about revenue, thinking like, you know, this is back when we were doing $5 or $6 million a year in revenue. I'm like, man, people are probably thinking that I'm over here making $5 million a year. And, you know, meanwhile, they're only making $15, $18 an hour, or $22 an hour, or whatever it was. I think the reason I felt that was because we weren't transparent about it. Well, yeah, it's easy if you just throw out, hey, we're going to do X amount of revenue this year. People probably do feel that way. But taking the time and energy to explain why that matters. What is revenue? What is gross profit? When we say we're at 54% gross profit, does that mean we just made 54% of everything? We just made that?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. We still have overheads. Okay, so what about 14% net profit? That's our budget this year. What's that mean? Does that just go into Brady's pocket? No. What do we do with that? how do we reinvest that? Where does that cash go? I think one of the, other than the Ops L10 and the Biz L10 where it's leaders, we talk about those things all the time. Another place we talk about that with leaders is quarterly offsites. So we do quarterly offsites. I think the last one we did, it was much about where's our money went this year.
Yes.
So we talked about capital expenses, things we're paying for the building, equipment that we're purchasing. This year we paid off a bunch of debt. We're debt-free as a business. We talked about how much cash went to that. Yeah. Then another place that's talked about, not with leaders, with the whole company, is in our quarterly town halls. So the last town hall that we did, we talked all about that. It was just a financial review. It's like, hey guys, this is what's happened this year. This is how much net profit. This is what net profit is. This is where it goes. And I think like the thing about it is like, I don't ever want to be the owner that sits here and says like, yeah, the company's making a bunch of money, but I'm not making anything. Like, that's not true either. Obviously, of course, the company does better. I do better. What I want to be though is everybody in this room does better. Every single person in this room is going to do better as we make more profit. One of my favorite metrics from last year, we paid $480,000 in employee bonuses. We pay competitive wages to every single person, competitive hourly wages. Then on top of that, $480,000 for our 60 employees in just bonus dollars.
That's awesome.
And our budget, our goal for the year that we track on our super KPIs we track with the company every town hall, our budget was for $350. We blew that out of the water. That's because we exceeded our profitability goal.
Yeah, and we're able to show that. And I'll say from our operational leaders, our managers, they talk about it often of like why they like to work here, and they share because they're working with the owner that's fully transparent. And first I thank you for that, and then second, I think you alluded to this a little bit, but all of our managers are tied to performance. Most of your operational leaders are tied to gross margins. The budget sets that, so they know when they're going into these budget planning workshops, we have to be transparent because it's tied to essentially what they're going to be paid and their income, which is great. And I think that they get to see when they hit budget, they're doing really well. When they hit vision, they're doing exceptional. Yep. They're being rewarded for that. So it's the same thing for our sales. We've done great with sales, right? We'll give them as many leads as they want if their KPIs are there, and we're never going to cap them. A lot of times, leaders, operational leaders, that we've done, I don't know about the entire industry, there's been kind of a ceiling. Like they're mostly salary based. There's always bonus opportunity. But now with the transparency and the clarity of budget versus vision, you can see how you can go, for a service manager, how you can go make 50% of your base if you're really exceptional. 25%, 30%. And we have multiple leaders right now making 20, 30% of their base salary because they're performing so well. And it's because they can see it and they're bought in. And I just love that piece. I think it's something that can get lost because it can make people uncomfortable. Well, do the uncomfortable thing.
Yep.
And also, when you're not in a good spot, people can see it. It's like, okay, well, these are the changes. These are the reasons why. If we don't increase XYZ, something has to get eliminated. And what's that going to be? Yep. That's what I love about our overhead conversations.
Yeah, I think in 2024 we were like 3% net profit or something. It was a really hard year, and we were pulling money from our line of credit, and we were like, there was times where money was tight, and that was talked about. It's a lot easier talking about it when things are great. Hey guys, look, great job.
Sure.
We 15% net, but when it's like, hey guys, we just pulled $100,000 from our line of credit. To make this payroll, and this is the importance of that, and we need to really make sure that we're hitting our budget and goal this week so that we can pay that line of credit back. Like, we're having those conversations when it's bad too, and there's been a lot of that. So,
and I think it's important. Like, one of the things I would say from 24, so 25 was extremely successful, and 24 was unique because we had our gross margins were really low in 24 because we staffed for 25% lead growth. Well, when we have these conversations of, guys, our net profit has dropped to 3%, our gross margin in plumbing is below 50, it should be at 59%, is the benchmark. We're hovering 56, 57% now. It makes those conversations very clear and understanding is, yes, it's important to staff to scale, but if you overstaff, you can get yourself in some tough positions.
You can get yourself
and that's the budget, back to budget planning, right? You have to have a staffing plan that matches your overhead and your gross margins.
Yep.
You know, a lot of times, and I don't disagree that overstaffing can put you in an amazing position to scale. I also can say the opposite is true. If the leads don't come and you're overstaffed, they can put you in a very vulnerable state. And some become fixed expenses.
Yep, 100%.
Not just labor.
And
they go in the overhead.
That's a big part of this BPW budget business planning workshop that we do every fall is the staffing plan. We spend a ton of time on the staffing plan, track that staffing plan. That's something that lives in our budget sheet. And I think we'll have a future episode on that.
And the budget plan, it drives down not only to calls rank conversion rate, it drives down to calls per tech per day. And we use two metrics. We use your standard staffing plan, which shows your total tech count. And then we use what's called an active tech count. It's a number that we made up. I don't know if the active tech, someone might have a direct, but what that is what is your true tech count with call offs and sick and, you know, delays between staffing? Like, what is the number of techs that are actually running calls that day? And then we can see the active tech per call count. And we're staffing off those things. And then in our budget, we're building the labor, we're increasing the labor to that. And it allows us to get a really good lens of, and sometimes we will say, we've done this in HVAC, we're willing to take a little bit less gross margin because we know the leads are going to come and we can blow out our budget. Like going into 26, we're growing, you know, our budget's for $16 million. I think we can do $20 million next year, and we're going to staff HVAC to have that growth because we've seen with our marketing agency, we've seen with the lead count, we've seen with our membership growth and the system checks that we can staff appropriately to that, and then that's budget vision. So everything that we talk about, everything that we do goes back to that budget planning workshop. And it gets me excited. Like I get pumped up.
That staffing, you know, it's such a push-pull. It's like, well, all right, we'd love to add, like a lot of times our managers are like, yeah, I think we need more techs. All right, great. But put that into the formula, put that into the sheet, and what's that do to your gross margins, your gross profit dollars? Like that push-pull, we spend a ton of time talking about that as we're planning the year. I think that'd be a great future episode just to talk more about staffing plan and how we determine that calls per tech per day. So this is awesome, man. I mean, me and you could sit here and talk about these numbers all day. We like to nerd out on this stuff. I know we were really deep into the weeds today, but I think that we went years and we never got this deep into the weeds in our business. And I think that's why we weren't having the success we wanted. Mm-hmm. As you and I have better understand our numbers and every number, I mean, if you look at our scorecards and the sheet we look at for the monthly operating review, there's like, I don't know how many lines, 200 or 300 lines, hundreds of lines. And you and I being able to understand those has been completely transformative. And then you being able to get our business unit managers to understand their portion of that and beyond, completely transformative. And it's been a big project. But I think that we can sit here today and say everybody understands what's on that sheet and understands how each thing drives each thing. So it's a great episode, man. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in this week's episode of Reimagining Home Services. We're super excited that we'll have 3 episodes every month come out. They're going to be on all your major platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and also leave a comment if there's a topic that you'd like us to cover.